This article was actually in Sure Magazine. So if you get Sure Magazine, this is their summer edition, can also be found online in their news section of their site. And the title of the article is Should Employers Take Positions on Social and Political Issues? Two experts debate the issue. So the first individual that they spoke to was a HR professional, and she shared her thoughts and some references in regards to why a company should. And the second individual was also an HR pro, I believe, specifically from the recruiting space.
Okay.
And they made a pretty compelling case for no. And I thought this was a really interesting article to talk about because as an HR pro, providing guidance to a variety of businesses on, kind of this exact question, I'd say it is yes for some and it's no for others. And I find there tends not to be many companies that fall in between. And so it's interesting to hear that there's essentially studies to support each side and that there's, strong opinions on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that there are uh positive and negatives for both. And that we're pretty divided on that issue because if you think of a lot of the issues that are out there, it's kind of like pick a side and there's no in between. And so um I agree. It also is kind of a it depends. Because maybe you are, for example, in a government contracting space where you may be in a position where you can't show favoritism or you can't show, um, you know, strong opinions one way or another that might have to do with a particular administration, how they're conducting, running the government. Or you may be in law, or you may be in some other firm or field where it helps to be at least assumed fair and balanced, or in the center. So, yeah, what are some things that stood out to you in the article?
There was quite a few, and I'm going to summarize the segment of the expert who answered yes, yes, employers should take positions. And in summary, there was a survey back in 2019. It was the Gartner study that had over 30,000 people worldwide actually respond. And 87% of employees said businesses should take a position on social issues relevant to their business. And then more recently, there was a 2021 survey by Atlassian, and 61% of millennial respondents said they prefer companies that take a stand on social issues. So when you look at it just from a stat standpoint, there's an overwhelming majority that says, yes, companies should be doing this. But Joey, there was a part of the article that really got me thinking whether I fell on the yes or the no side. And this was the part that really was kind of the aha. And I'm gonna paraphrase it. It says it starts with moreover, right? So quoting it, speaking to monumental socio-political and environmental issues becomes more about doing what is necessary than playing it safe. That really resonated with me. And it says, simply put, employers that maintain a myopic position represent nothing more than a building, a product, or a service.
Yeah, our friends at a company Fearless in Baltimore, their tagline is software with the soul. And so when you say something like that, where you are just a building, just a product, that makes me think of them. And you want to, at least in this business climate, in this social, economic, political climate, you want people to know what you stand for because you want to build community around your product, build community around your services, your offerings. And so I'm not saying to go hardcore one way or another, but certainly have some thought and intention around, yeah, what do you believe about certain things? And maybe, there's the owner or management opinion, there can be employee sentiment as well. And so you kind of want to find that place where that resonates with the most people of, well, where do we stand on these topics? I can think of some implications of that with regard to recruiting and retention and keeping people on staff. I think if we look at case studies, right, we think about Netflix and they had a stir up a couple months ago, if not years ago, when it came down to Dave Chappelle and having his comedy on the platform. And some folks didn't quite think he was the best person to have on the platform and to make money from. We're seeing it more recently. With Target and they're being in the news for some of the merchandise that's being sold. And so um, some people with that Target scenario, felt bad that they took a position and then retreated, and then others feel like, why'd you take that position in the first place? So it does make doing business a little bit more complicated. But I think if you take a position for the right reasons, you do your research, you're grounded in your position, your team is on board, I think, hope, and believe it'll ultimately work out for you. But yeah, taking a position is, like you said, it's an essential these days.
It's really a tough topic because like anything that is social or political issue, they are always hot topics, and that can present a problem in the workplace or in business if you encounter, others that have a differing of opinion. And I think that's ultimately where companies have previously took a conservative approach because they didn't want to rock the boat. But certainly there's been more pressure and certainly expectation. If you look at the stats from these surveys, there's expectations from employees that companies are going to take a position. And I think I can kind of summarize or kind of wrap up this section of the yes um, segment by saying that, and this is from the article, that companies can increase their influence in the marketplace by demonstrating to their employees and communities that they have a commitment to inclusion and innovation. And I think as somebody who works with small business owners on both of those initiatives, it really got me thinking about this a little bit differently. And hopefully, talking about it has prompted maybe others to think about their position and their approach on this as well.
Yeah, I think about the world's greatest basketball player ever. Of course, I'm talking about Michael Jordan. He's famous for saying early on in the 90s when people were concerned about his shoes and maybe whether he would take stands on certain things, he said, Republicans buy sneakers too. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because it's like, well, how can you sell to both sides? But but now I think even just it's evolved beyond him, the person. There's the Jordan brand. If you look at a lot of their philanthropy, it's very clear that they give to causes um, and champion underserved causes, underserved communities, so on and so forth. And I think he's maybe even come closer to the middle as far as like his beliefs and convictions. And so I look to that as an example of maybe people staying on the sidelines in maybe the 90s and early 2000s, but now you've got to get in the game and you've got to have positions. And it's not to necessarily say it's all got to be front page on your website or always actively posting social media. To me, I think it goes back to essentially your values and how you determine deals to pursue, deals not to pursue, people to hire, people not to hire, what causes reprimand, what doesn't cause reprimand, what causes reward, what doesn't cause reward. And so, um, tricky stuff. But if you feel like you'd be going at it alone, there's a good HR company that can help you with all of that stuff. Um, I don't want to take up too much time on the yes, but what were your thoughts on the no, and what should people know about not taking stands? Because I want to give both sides, you know.
Yep. So, going back to the article, there was a different HR pro who said, absolutely not. And they referred to a 2021 survey that was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology. And it essentially said that, taking a hardline stance on political or social issues negatively affects a company's recruitment efforts. Um, and negatively impacting up to 40% of job seekers. And I will say that in having conversations with small businesses that have had, that have taken this no approach, it is really just not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to create an environment where anybody on either side of the issue might feel like they've been, um, they've been put in a position with their employer to have, such a misalignment of opinions. And the HR pro goes on to talk about how these negative there are these negative consequences, how it can impact the workforce and even potentially create a hostile work environment. And the example that they shared, I thought was a great one because it's a situation I think many companies could find them in. And in short, it was described that, if there was an employee who found themselves on, say, the opposite side of a company's position, then they could potentially argue that they were being discriminated against. So think about the situation where you have to discipline a team member for something that actually happened, but the timing of it is not great because maybe they just publicly spoke out against that company's position. And so now kind of the optics of that disciplinary action could feel discriminatory. And that's just not a position as a company you want to find yourself in or as an employee. So I think it makes a pretty good argument for why this may be an area to just say like, no, don't take a stance, like don't create more problems. But as you saw and heard on like kind of the first segment of the show, there's a lot of reasons why. So like, what a tough spot to be in and have to make the decision on what's right for your company.
Summer, there's so much more to running business and managing than the widgets you sell and the people you bring on board, and this doesn't make it any easier. I go back to sort of what I was saying in the beginning about those groups that really have to not take any stances at all. But really, it boils down to, I think. Why are you choosing not to take a stance? Are you choosing not to take a chance? Oh, sorry, tongue tied. Are you choosing not to take a stance because you want to serve the greatest number of people? You have a ethics or morality clause of some sort in your profession. You have an oath in your profession. You don't believe that you have all of the facts on a certain issue. And I think it's super interesting because it's not just having a position on everything all at once. There are various hot button topics, issues, political stances, you name it, where you've got to have a position or choose to take a measured approach on everything. And so it's very much kind of dependent upon your staff, I think, because some teams, something may be, for example, one group may be very strongly affirmative on gun rights. Another might be very against gun rights as they are today, right? But depending on the demographics of your business, you may not have to deal with all of these various issues to different degrees. So it's really just kind of having a pulse check on your team of, hey, how are people feeling? Is it impacting us? Is it impacting our customer base? Are there certain people who need to hear from us about this topic? So on and so forth. But it's not a bad idea if you need to if you need to run it by attorney or run it by a HR team. seek counsel first if you're worried.
I think that's really solid advice, and it's truly kind of the summarized conversations that we have with business owners when we're trying to decide, should we take a position, should we not, what are the pros, what are the cons, and what do we need to be thinking about in terms of really the impact of doing something versus the impact of not doing something. And it's a really hard position to be in. Real quick story before we move on to Consultants Corner. There was a new HR leader at one of the clients that we have who joined. And this was, I think they joined the company maybe within a week of Roe v. Wade being reversed. And they came to me and said, can you believe it? It's my first week on the job. And, I'm being pressured by our executive team to form a position for us. And I was just like, oh boy, like no pressure, right? And kind of some of the discussions that we had, as we were kind of weighing what the right approach was, is essentially asking, how does this impact the team? How is it, or is it relevant to our business? And there was essentially like a happy medium, I think, is where we landed, which is, yes, we're going to approach the topic instead of staying silent, but we're going to approach it more from a not like the company has a position on like what should or shouldn't be happening, but rather, if you're a team member who's impacted as a result of this, we're here to support you. So I think, just as we said very early on, every company, I think every situation has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Case by case. There you go. There's no one size fits all to this.